Hello, my name is E. Caraway, and I'm the Director of Life Sciences for Georgia Department of Economic Development. The Department of Economic Development is the lead agency for recruiting new business into the state of Georgia, as well as helping existing industry to succeed in the state of Georgia. We are your one-stop shop to connect you with resources across the state, as well as to help you navigate any business need that you may have. We are very excited to partner here today with Georgia Bio and to be a part of this Georgia Bio Summit 2021. It's our goal to work with businesses like yours as we continue to be successful in the state of Georgia. Georgia has shown what we can do over the years as being #1 state to do business for 8 years in a row, both by Area Development and Site Selection magazine. What that says is you are part of that partnership that it takes for us to be successful, and that we all work together time after time after time. Today, I'm proud to be a sponsor of this panel that exists as we talk about agriculture and its role that it plays along with life sciences. Whether we are looking at the feed, whether we're looking at biofuel, from lab to consumer, it's very important to recognize those relationships together. I'm very excited to see what this panel brings for each of us. Please know that we are here to partner with you as you grow across the state of Georgia. Thank you.
And welcome to Georgia Bio's Bio Innovation Summit. Today we're having a discussion about fueling and feeding Georgia's future, from lab to farm to consumer. My name is Sarah Gallo, and I'm Vice President for Agriculture and Environment at the Biotechnology Innovation Organization. I'm joined today by Kevin Karam, the Director of the Southeast Food and Feed Laboratory for the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. We're also joined by Lee Harron, Vice President of Venture Development at the Georgia Research Alliance. It's a pleasure to speak with both of you today. I'm going to make a few comments, and then I will turn it over to the panelists for further introduction. As I mentioned, I'm fortunate enough to lead BIO's Agriculture and Environment mission area. Our members span a number of technology platforms, looking at everything from crop production to bringing more nutritious food to the marketplace, to changing the fuel infrastructure and sustainability of fuels in the country, as well as looking at bio-based manufacturing and ways that biotechnology can improve the lives of everyday Americans. So most recently, and as you can imagine in the context of the broader conversations going on today, issues like climate and resiliency and the post-COVID environment are really offering a unique opportunity for us to position biotechnology as a solution and part of a broader effort to solve some pretty big global societal challenges. And in doing so, we're able to use things like climate change or carbon capture, looking at ways of bringing more nutritious and healthy food to more people across the world. And again, decarbonizing our infrastructure and our supply chains as really crucial lenses to make sure that the environment is conditioned for as many biotechnology products as they can to enter the marketplace and start realizing some societal benefits. So looking forward to hearing the insights of our panelists today, and I think we'll get right into it with some introductions. So Kevin, if I can ask you to introduce yourself first, and then we'll turn to Lee.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. My name is Kevin Karam, and I'm currently the Director of the Southeast Food and Feed Laboratory for FDA's Food and Feed Testing Services, which is a national program that includes 8 laboratories across the country. I'm here today to talk to colleagues about my experiences. I'm not here in an official FDA capacity. I spent 22 years prior to this position at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and have a depth of experience with global outbreaks and things related to everything from disease control and electronic medical records to agricultural outbreaks and good agricultural practices. And I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Lee?
Sure. Thanks, Sarah, and thanks for asking me to participate in this panel. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Lee Harmon. I'm with the Georgia Research Alliance, and the GRA is a 31-year-old not-for-profit entity located in Atlanta with a focus on increasing the research capabilities of the state's research universities. And further to translate that research capability into commercial opportunities or through a process of really technology-based economic development. The group where I spend most of my time is with GRA Ventures, and we work with the universities to identify technology opportunities. And then we apply resources in the form of grants, loans, mentoring to help realize that commercial opportunity. Our goal in that regard is to create startups and employ Georgians in the state of Georgia.
That's great. Thank you both. And Lee, that introduction is a perfect segue into the first question that I'd like to ask you. So we know that Georgia farmers are facing several modern day obstacles, and I think you and I both recognize that innovation can help them overcome some of those challenges. As you mentioned, universities are essential partners in helping growers and livestock producers. So can you tell us more about the Georgia Research Alliance Greater Yield Initiative, and
Sure.
specifically how it aims to get more of that innovation, as you said, out of the university labs and into the hands of producers?
Sure, be glad to. Greater Yield is a relatively new initiative of the Georgia Research Alliance. We started this 18 months ago. It is an accelerator model designed to basically do what we do, but I guess you could say on steroids. We work with the universities to identify technologies applicable to food, feed, ag tech, food tech. We put these technologies into cohorts, and then they go through a structured curriculum related to many different issues. The common denominator usually is, how do I take this technology from my lab and get it to a marketplace in a startup company? So we deal with things such as intellectual property, licensing, customer discovery, risk mitigation, that sort of thing, specific to food and agriculture. So that's what the Greater Yield program is intended to do. We're actually in a second cohort right now. We're looking at projects for a third cohort. Our results have been very good. We had 6 in that initial cohort, 5 from the University of Georgia. Not surprising, considering it's the land-grant institution with a very good College of Agriculture, 1 from Kennesaw State. And currently we're working with 2 projects from Georgia Tech, both in the poultry industry. So that's what we're trying to do, where we will be measuring our impact and be able to report on those hopefully this time next year.
That's great. Thank you for that explanation. Super exciting work for sure. So many, even at Bio, we run into so many companies that face those similar challenges, or trying to get work out of the lab and not really being sure of the landscape that you need to navigate. So thank you for that great work that you're doing. So Kevin, I'll turn to you, and I know you can harken on a little bit of your personal background to answer this question. Certainly COVID exposed so many vulnerabilities in our supply chains and really our ability to ensure equitable access to nutritious food. So given the fact that the lab where you currently are specializes in nutrient analysis, can you speak to the ability of new technologies in food and feed to deliver more nutritious food to a greater number of people, or even in some cases to a greater number of livestock? And welcome any thoughts you have about any of the impacts to global food security that you've witnessed over the last few years.
Yeah, I think a couple areas come to mind right away. And I think, the COVID pandemic has certainly impacted supply chains in a number, not only in food and feed, but in products and services. And it's really exposed limitations and weaknesses in our ability to have a global economy. I mean, we're seeing that over and over again. On the food side, I think there was a trend towards organic local markets and people trying to understand how you can buy locally. So people in the state of Georgia want to buy produce and food from Georgia. And I think this has exacerbated that. And it's starting to lead to different types of technology that may allow that to be a more feasible concept. And so in cities, you have food deserts where people don't have access to certain things. And I think there are some standards that can be applied for that could offset some of the food supply limitations in those areas. But on a global level, what we're seeing in our lab now, we predominantly test imported products. And one of the big areas of concern is the quality of the material coming in and also the purity of that material. And so we look at food adulteration as a major economic and health risk to imports coming into the United States. And so we focus a lot on what is the nutritional component. Is it actually what they are claiming that it is going to be? And then we learn a lot about these products that are coming in that may not be typical to most Americans. And so we can make recommendations on nutritional assessment of that. And this flows over into label claims. So we work with the group at FDA that does regulation of label claims on food products. And that's also greatly impacted by the testing. In terms of COVID and the supply chain, we've talked for years, and many of you have been involved in those conversations, is how do you improve the cold chain? Whether it's getting a diagnostic specimen out of the jungle to a laboratory or getting food products halfway around the world in a condition that makes them viable and not spoiled. And this is specifically true for seafood products, which is a huge import, not only in the United States, but a lot of parts of the world. So how do you provide technology to help with cold chain is an area that I think might really be affected by COVID, because it's not only is it impacting supply of all sorts of things, but it's forcing people to use technology to improve supply chain and cold chain for things like seafood and other perishables.
That's great. Thank you. That's really insightful. Thank you. So the two of you are uniquely positioned to answer this question far better than me. So I'm going to ask, for the benefit of everyone listening to our discussion, what role do the food and ag sectors play in the life science ecosystem in Georgia?
I can kick this one off. Well, agribusiness is the #1 industry in the state of Georgia. So that in itself says a lot, and it's very broad and diverse. It's everything from poultry. Georgia's the largest broiler producing state in the nation. That's basically the chicken we eat. And Georgia's also #1 for peanuts. #2 for cotton, which is not food, but it's fiber. And so a large piece of the economy of the state is dependent on agribusiness. Agribusiness is basically part of life sciences, any way we look at it. So improvements, that anything that can be done to improve crop yield, drought resistance, animal welfare, those are all can be achieved with tools of biotechnology, whether it's CRISPR, looking at incorporating genes for drought resistance, pest and herbicide resistance, to poultry, putting automation on the factory floor with poultry processing to create a safer environment for workers. Because labor is one of the big issues that we're dealing with right now across all sectors of agribusiness. So I look at the way I look at ag tech and agribusiness, it is the state of Georgia. It's the biggest business. It is, I wouldn't say largely untapped, but we're all well aware of the transformative effect that biotech has had in human healthcare. We can see the same impact in agriculture. I have no doubt about that. It's going to take some years to realize that, but I think we'll all be surprised with the momentum and where we're going to be, say, 5 to 10 years from now.
Kevin, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just a little bit. I mean, in my notes, I had listed poultry, peaches, and peanuts, right, as state of Georgia. And it's such a huge part of the state's economy, as Lee said, and such an important piece of it. But I think Georgia is unique from many other states in the sense that we have access to things here that including this agricultural base and this economy. But we also have this global presence, you know, the companies that are here in the Atlanta area and across the state. The CDC is here. This is the largest food and feed laboratory within FDA's network, and we get a ton of imports here. So I think the state of Georgia is uniquely positioned, having import ports, having a huge economy related to agriculture and a workforce, and having the university and the federal services like FDA and CDC. Georgia Tech is one of the best universities in the country. So I think we're uniquely positioned to have these collaborations across this ecosystem that could really impact implementation of technology towards benefiting food and agriculture.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And the examples that you gave are so relevant today too. And I think we can get to the next question. But one of the things that we're certainly noticing is in this, you know, coming out of COVID and with the attention paid towards science and the ability for scientific discovery to help us, you know, come out of a pandemic, that excitement exists within the food and ag sector. And I think, as you've pointed out, you know, your state in particular is ready to capitalize on that. And it's such a inspiring sort of piece of how we can help promote science and scientific innovation in solving some of these problems that we have even post-COVID. So appreciate your comments. I did want to ask your insights on some major trends impacting that life science industry that you just discussed. So as all of us look to 2022 and most of us look to return to being able to sit next to each other in person, one thing that I think is always interesting to hear is, you know, what do innovators or academics or the government need to consider as we look to prioritize our efforts? So when you all think about 2022 and what's on the horizon, what do you see as those major trends that are going to be impacting your businesses?
Kevin, you want to take this one first, or?
Sure. I can jump in the pool here. I think for me, my experiences over the past probably decade have indicated a couple of really important features that I think are impacting life sciences in a way that I guess I never thought about before that or didn't anticipate it being so relevant. And one is technological advances in computational sciences. So blockchain technologies, you know, people think of cryptocurrency, but I was on the biosecurity side for years on the global front with select agents and tier 1 pathogens. And really, how do you secure sample collections? How do you secure movement of specimens, chain of custody for investigations? Blockchain is a methodology that could really impact and make a lot of these systems much more efficient, but it's not immediately attainable for most of us who've never done that type of work. So we have to find our friend down the hall who knows computational science to explain it to us, right? Or listen to one of my nephews tell me about cryptocurrency, right? So, but I think that has a huge potential to be impactful on electronic systems that are related to sample collection, sample movement, data entry, et cetera. And there's two other pieces. One of the others is artificial intelligence and understanding how AI can really help us inform decisions for surveillance. So Lee's familiar with this. You have to do surveillance of poultry houses, and there's certain standards they have to meet, but clearly epidemiologists can't survey every poultry house and every chicken. And so you have to figure out from historic data, what's the most efficient approach to this pattern that you need to look at to make things the highest quality and the most efficient. And I think, you know, we're currently doing some work on that through our laboratories, and I'm really anxious to see what the results look like. So I think that has a huge potential. And the third area is really training systems. As we've seen in the last 5 years, social media and the way people get their information has changed so drastically that they're not always looking at expertise. You know, they're not exactly looking for the right sources of data. So how do you reach them? How do you implement systems that are remote? And I think the pandemic has shown us that we do Zoom calls, we do all these things. And at the end of my tenure at CDC, we had developed these global training programs using virtual reality systems where we could immerse people halfway around the world in a laboratory with us, an animated laboratory, and do trainings, you know, with tactile sensing, with the gloves. And it really gave us a sense of being there even though we weren't there. And ironically, the reduction in the fees for traveling people halfway around the world allowed us to pay for the equipment that we could then ship to that laboratory. So I think there's huge implications for, you know, that training piece and communications using technology like augmented and virtual reality systems.
Yeah, and to follow on that, you know, and I'll keep my comments sort of limited more to the ag and food tech space, but precision agriculture, that's a term we've probably all heard. You know, it's applying technology to improve many different aspects of agriculture, whether it be crop yield, many times it's crop yield, reduced labor is an emerging trend and we're seeing a lot of that coming from all our universities. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Number one, out of the University of Georgia, in our first greater yield cohort, we have a project that's using a cobot, which is a collaborative robot, to facilitate onion sorting. As you know, Sarah, you may not beat that. You've probably heard of Vidalia onions.
I do know Vidalia onions.
Okay, there are 7 counties in the state of Georgia that can grow onions, and they're authorized to call them Vidalia onions. Okay, there are other sweet onions, oftentimes from Texas, Mexico, or Peru, but Vidalia onions come from a 7-county area. University of Georgia does have a Vidalia Onion and Vegetable Research Center located in Lyons, Georgia. Well, this project we have at University of Georgia called Inverse AI uses artificial intelligence, which Kevin mentioned, and optical vision to facilitate the sorting process for Vidalia onions. Right now, it's labor intensive. You know, and the folks that are doing that, they're relatively low wage jobs. At the end of a shift, they're probably letting a lot of faulty onions go by and, you know, throwing out some good onions. A robot doesn't care. A robot could work 24/7 and they're going to be consistent. And what you're doing, you're taking those workers that were sorting the onions and training them how to use the robot. You know, they could be sitting, you know, in a remote location if need be, but in a control center manning that cobot. Okay, so it's not necessarily displacing workers as much as it is training those workers for higher skilled jobs, you know. So that's one example of precision ag. There are other examples that have been around for a while, like it's self-driving tractors. I think we're just scratching the surface of the precision. Yeah. In fact, UGA is planning in their innovation hub area, an entire building dedicated to precision agriculture. So we're just scratching the surface there. Other trends that we see that are relevant, you know, I think you're going to see systems biology and synthetic biology specifically applied to agriculture. You know, we've heard these terms, and a lot of times right now it has industrial applications for food and for fuel, but it also has applications for food, you know, where you can actually engineer out deleterious traits. You're not necessarily inserting new genetic material, so you can still be non-GMO, but yet have an improved product. And Sarah, I know you see this from a national level, the trend toward sustainability, you know, carbon capture, which are all related to climate change. That is a huge theme now in agriculture. How do we increase sustainability? How do we, you know, monetize carbon capture in an efficient way, in a standard way? You hear the term regenerative agriculture bandied about quite a bit, which is, you know, not tilling, preserving the soil. It's better for carbon capture. Those are all trends that I think the state of Georgia can be a leader in, you know, with technology, like ability to measure carbon sequestered in the soil. And then one final sort of trend that we're seeing can have a difference is in the alternative protein space. If you haven't been exposed to the Impossible Burger, Beyond Meat Burger, over the last year since, but you've been living in a cave somewhere, because their sales, those are plant-based material, plant-based beef. And while it doesn't have quite the same flavor, it's pretty close to the taste of ground beef, and it's all plant-based. And I think you're going to see more and more of that in response to the need to feed the world in 2050. We're going to have a tremendous shortage of protein in 2050 if we don't develop alternative sources of protein. Connection with that, one of the things that Greater Yield is doing is working with a project also at the University of Georgia related to cultured seafood, or cultured meat and seafood, but developing a scaffold. It's going to be a huge, massive technological undertaking. It's not as simple as a lot of people think it is to develop cultured meat, but that's also something that you're going to see. I mean, we're talking in I think the 10 to 20 year time frame is a large percentage. We're not going to reduce our animal derived protein. We will need that much more protein, in 10 to 20 years, just because of the increasing wealth throughout the world, which is great, and the consequent desire for more protein. So those are sort of my trends, and the way in some of the things we're doing in the state of Georgia to address those.
Well, between the two of you, you've hit on everything that's on my 2022 horizon as well. So couldn't agree more. And also, a lifetime in agriculture policy will teach you to always know the specialty crops of the state with which you're talking. So I'm prepared with Vidalia onions all the way, for sure. So lastly, and I think our discussion here today has been, a perfect example of this, and it's been the heart of my work at Bio for a number of years now, in really thinking about what kind of collaborations or alliances and partnerships need to exist in order to propel and drive market demand for all of these exciting innovations that we've talked about. So, just even looking at us today, we have government, academia, industry, investors, all gathered here, and just wondering, are there any partnerships that we haven't necessarily talked about? We've talked about producers and university systems, but are there any that we haven't talked about that you would flag as important for our collective mission moving forward?
From my perspective, working with the universities, working with startup companies coming from the universities, they often don't have the critical mass, whether it be technology mass, management mass, marketing mass. Just like the pharmaceutical industry, a small biotech has a difficult time addressing a very broad market. The same thing applies in agriculture, if not more so, is collaboration between the small startup and the large biotech companies, like, whether it be a Bayer, Syngenta, that sort of thing. And fortunately, the large companies are on board with that. So that's one collaboration. And so it's a government in the state of Georgia is contributing also. The state level, the university level, the small company level, and large corporate partner level. That kind of collaboration can be extremely powerful.
Okay, Kevin, did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Lee on all accounts. One of the things I've personally experienced over the past decade, I've got some outside interest in biotech. And I used to think that the hardest part was raising capital to get a project started, but it's really not. You can find a little bit of money and sometimes a lot of money if you have a good idea. The hardest part to me is finding the right people to partner with. And many scientists, speaking from experience, they're focused on what they have in front of them. They really don't lift their head up enough because they don't have the time.
Right.
So forums like this and interactions with people like Lee, I think, really provide a platform where academics and startups can really exchange ideas, and they might hit on that one or two people that could really help them move to that next position, and force them to see that they can't do it all themselves, because nobody can do it all themselves, in my experience.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's certainly something where you all and us as Bio, and I know Georgia Bio considers themselves key to helping facilitate those. So point well taken. Yeah. Well, that's all the questions I had for today. I want to thank Lee and Kevin so much for this conversation. Always enjoy talking about biotech in the ag and environment space. And thank you both for joining us.
It's great. Thank you.